The Star Wars film series is one of the most commercially and critically successful franchises in history. Ticket sales alone have yielded over $9.5 billion worldwide to date, and that's not counting merch sales, licensing deals, and other profits. Since its start in 1977, the series has grown from a trilogy of well-received fantasy movies into a full-blown, worldwide institution, applauded for its ability to excite and inspire audiences. Of course, this isn't to say that the Star Wars franchise is completely perfect. Far from it. Fans can and will pick apart the movies and find dozens of slip-ups and make a laundry list of less than awesome moments that slightly mar the overall pictures. But those little moments would be small potatoes in comparison to the mistake Disney has admitted to making with the Star Wars franchise, one that the studio is trying to remedy as we speak. During a September 2018 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Walt Disney Company CEO Bob Iger addressed the fact that, after acquiring Lucasfilm for just over $4 billion in 2012, Disney has churned out one Star Wars movie every year since 2015. Specifically, those movies would be J.J. Abrams' Episode 7, The Force Awakens, the series' first anthology film Rogue One in 2016, the Rian Johnson-directed Episode 8, The Last Jedi in December 2017, and the young Han Solo movie, simply called Solo, just 5 months later in May 2018. When reporter Matthew Belloni brought up the seemingly growing impression that Disney should pump the brakes on its Star Wars releases and not put out a new movie each year, Iger surprisingly agreed. He actually admitted that the huge volume of releases right out of the gate was a total mistake, and even took personal responsibility for the evident fatigue-inducing misstep. Iger confessed, "As I look back, I think the mistake that I made, I take the blame, was a little too much, too fast." Looking ahead, the CEO said that Disney will no longer be producing Star Wars movies at such an accelerated pace. According to Iger, fans can expect some slowdown following the release of J.J. Abrams' Episode 9, although no one should expect the House of Mouse to bring things to a total halt. As Iger explained, the state of Star Wars movies beyond 2019's Episode 9 will still be robust, just with a little more breathing room. He reminded readers that Game of Thrones directors David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are actively developing their own Star Wars saga, about which very little is currently known. Last we heard, Rian Johnson was still tinkering away with development on his own film trilogy. The company is also developing at least one big-budget TV show for its upcoming streaming service. But this content, Iger said, will be served up a little more judiciously, with the company being, quote, a little more careful about volume and timing. The suggestion that Disney should throttle down on the Star Wars movies isn't a particularly new idea. Fans and commentators have been talking about the potential consequences of Star Wars oversaturation for a while, with the once unthinkable term Star Wars fatigue becoming a frequent talking point. The franchise took a major hit with the massively underperforming Solo, a Star Wars story, which essentially bombed at the box office after a notoriously troubled production. Following that high-profile disappointment, a whole lot of people got on board with the idea that Disney's strategy for Star Wars was actually killing interest in the once venerable franchise. The common wisdom was that Lucasfilm was trying too hard to mimic the release calendar of Marvel Studios, and it's backfiring in a big way. While there are fans and viewers who are perfectly happy with the current state of Star Wars, there's a vocal segment of the fanbase that's all but begging for Disney to get its act together as the series wraps up the Skywalker saga and moves on to stories beyond. Iger's comments seem to suggest that those fans are finally being heard. Though it's refreshing to hear Iger straight up admitting Disney dropped the ball, is it possible that the damage is already done? That's hard to predict. Already some feel that Disney has bigger problems with its Star Wars approach than the high volume of releases. After the interview, THR writer Graham McMillan questioned whether volume and timing are really to blame, and suggested that perhaps the audience has a problem with these specific Star Wars movies. In other words, a lot of people might just dislike the stories that Disney's telling, and that's a harder problem to fix than just stretching out a release schedule. Still, it seems that the people in charge at Disney are doing some serious reflection about how they might have mangled their very expensive space fantasy series. A less dense release schedule is a good start. As to whether or not that will be enough to bring the magic back to Star Wars, that remains to be seen.